A massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the dark void above the planet Kepler 442b. The station was huge, bigger than most cities, and it held thousands of beings from 12 different alien races. All of them worked together on one big project, turning the planet below into a place where life could grow and thrive. Inside the station's lowest levels, in the waste management sector, where nobody important ever went, a young female named Zara worked alone. She was Cytherian, a race that most other aliens looked down on. Her people had special abilities. They could see things that might happen in the future and feel the thoughts of others. But this gift had brought them nothing but trouble. 3 generations ago, the Cytherians had been conquered by the Galactic Coalition. The survivors were forced to work as servants, little better than slaves. They did the jobs that other species found too dangerous or too beneath them to do. Zara had been born into this life, and she had never known anything different. Every morning, Zara woke up in a tiny room that had once been used to store cleaning supplies. The walls were metal and cold, and there was barely enough space for her thin sleeping mat. She ate whatever scraps she could find from the food processors, usually stale bread and synthetic protein that tasted like nothing. Her job was to handle the toxic waste that came from the terraforming project. The materials were so dangerous that they could kill most alien species just by touching them. But Cytherians were different. Their psychic abilities somehow protected them from the worst effects. This made them perfect for the job, and perfectly trapped in it. Zara's supervisor was a creature called Crix, who belonged to the Vortanian race. Vortanians looked like giant insects with too many arms and voices that sounded like metal scraping against stone. Crix enjoyed making Zara's life miserable. He would give her the worst tasks, make her work extra hours, and never missed a chance to remind her how worthless she was. The other aliens on the station treated Zara like she was invisible. The proud saurians with their reptile-like faces and sharp teeth would push past her in the corridors without even looking down. The crystalline helix beings, who looked like walking diamonds, would speak about her as if she could not hear them, discussing how primitive and useless her kind was. On this particular day, Zara was moving a container of quantum-sensitive compounds through the station's main corridor when she saw something unusual. A group of new aliens had arrived, but these were different from any she had seen before. They walked on 2 legs like she did, had smooth skin instead of scales or crystals, and their eyes held something she rarely saw directed at her: curiosity instead of contempt. These were humans, the newest members of the Galactic Coalition. Most of the other alien races thought humans were primitive and violent. They had only recently developed space travel and had no psychic abilities that anyone knew about. Many questioned whether humans even belonged in the Coalition at all. Among the human group was a man called Jake Sullivan. He was not the tallest or strongest of the humans, but there was something different about him. While his companions looked around the station with wonder at all the advanced alien technology, Jake seemed more interested in watching the beings who lived and worked there. As Zara struggled with her heavy container, trying to avoid the busy corridor traffic, she felt that familiar tingling in her mind that meant her psychic abilities were responding to something. It was faint, like an echo of an echo, but it was there. Someone nearby had the gift, even if they did not know it themselves. She looked around and her eyes met those of the human called Jake. In that instant, something extraordinary happened. Jake stopped walking and stared at her, his face showing confusion and surprise. Zara felt a flood of images rush through her mind, visions of possible futures, memories that were not her own, and strangest of all, a sense of being truly seen. For the first time in her life, Jake experienced the same overwhelming flood of sensation. He saw flashes of Zara's memories, the cruelty she endured, the loneliness of her existence, and beneath it all, a strength and intelligence that burned like a hidden flame. He also saw glimpses of things that had not yet happened, images that made no sense, but felt more real than the corridor around him. The moment passed as quickly as it had come, broken when Crix appeared beside Zara like a dark shadow. The Vortanians. Multiple arms gestured angrily as his voice scraped out harsh words about lazy servants and wasted time. He grabbed the container from Zara's hands with such force that she stumbled and fell to her knees. Jake watched in horror as Crix continued to berate Zara, calling her worthless and stupid while she remained on the ground, not daring to look. Up, other aliens walked past as if nothing was happening, as if the scene was so common it was not worth noticing. Something inside Jake rebelled against what he was seeing. He had studied many alien cultures in preparation for this mission, but nothing had prepared him for witnessing such casual cruelty. He started to move toward Zara, but his captain, Lisa Monroe, caught his arm. Captain Monroe was a tough woman who had fought hard to earn humanity's place in the Coalition. She recognized the look in Jake's eyes and knew it could mean trouble. For all of them, humans were still proving themselves worthy of membership in galactic society, and they could not afford to make enemies by interfering in alien customs. No matter how wrong those customs seemed, Jake allowed himself to be pulled away, but he kept looking back at Zara as Crix forced her to her feet and pushed her down the corridor. The Cytherian did not look back, but Jake somehow knew that she was as aware of him as he was of her. That night, Jake could not sleep. He kept seeing Zara's face in his mind, remembering the intelligence and pain he had glimpsed in her eyes. He also could not stop thinking about those strange visions he had experienced when their eyes met. As a scientist, he knew he should dismiss them as stress or imagination, but they had felt more real than his own memories. He began to research everything he could find about Cytherians in the station's databases, and what he discovered made him angry in a way he had never been before. The Coalition's treatment of Zara's people violated every principle of human ethics and dignity. They were not just servants, they were prisoners, trapped by their own special abilities into lives of endless servitude. Jake realized that tomorrow he would seek out Zara again. Despite his captain's warnings and the danger it might pose to humanity's fragile position in the Coalition, something had passed between them in that corridor, a connection that felt too important to ignore. He did not yet understand what it meant, but he knew his life had changed the moment he looked into the eyes of the being everyone else treated like garbage. Jake could not get Zara out of his mind. Over the next few days, he found himself making detours through parts of the station where he might see her. He learned her schedule by watching carefully, noting when she collected waste materials, and when she returned to her tiny quarters. What he discovered horrified him even more than what he had read in the databases. Zara worked 16 hours every day, handling materials so toxic that they would kill most beings in minutes. She had burns on her hands from acid spills and moved with the careful stiffness of someone in constant pain. Yet she never complained, never asked for help, never even spoke unless Crix demanded answers to his harsh questions. The other humans on the mission thought Jake was spending too much time studying the station's social structure. Captain Monroe had warned him twice about his obsession with what she called alien labor practices. She reminded him that humans were guests here, and guests did not criticize their hosts. But Jake could not stop himself. He began carrying extra food rations in his pockets, and when he saw Zara alone in the corridors, he would leave them where she could find them. At first, she was suspicious and afraid, looking around as if she expected to be punished for taking them. But hunger eventually won, and Jake watched from a distance as she ate the first decent meals she had probably had in months. He also started leaving medical supplies in places where she would discover them. Basic healing gel for her burns, pain, relievers for her obvious injuries, vitamins to help with the malnutrition that was slowly killing her. Each time, Zara would look around with those intelligent eyes, searching for whoever was helping her God. Through his careful observation, Jake began to understand something that the other aliens either did not know or chose to ignore. Zara was not just handling garbage. The materials she worked with every day were quantum-sensitive compounds that were essential to the terraforming project. These substances could drive most beings insane just by being near them, and could kill with the slightest mistake in handling. But Zara moved among them like a dancer, her psychic abilities somehow allowing her to sense their properties and react to their dangers before they could harm her. She was not just a waste handler. She was performing one of the most skilled and dangerous jobs on the entire station. The Coalition was getting expert-level work while paying slave wages and offering no recognition. Jake also began to notice something else. Sometimes, when Zara was working with the quantum materials, she would stop and get a distant look in her eyes, as if she was seeing something that was not there. She would frown and shake her head, then return to her work with obvious worry on her face. One day, Jake managed to approach her when Crix was not around. Zara was alone in one of the storage areas, organizing containers of the dangerous compounds. When she saw him coming, she immediately dropped her eyes and tried to make herself smaller, the way all the servant species did when important people approached. Jake stopped several feet away and spoke quietly. He told her that he knew someone was leaving food and medical supplies for her, and that this person wanted her to know she was not alone. He said that this person saw her real worth, even if others did not. Zara looked up at him with surprise. No one had spoken to her with kindness in so long that she had almost forgotten what it sounded like. She started to speak, then stopped, glancing around nervously for Crix or other aliens who might punish her for talking to a Coalition member. Jake understood her fear and backed away, but not before he saw something in her eyes that made his heart race. Intelligence, yes, but also a desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, someone finally saw her as more than garbage. That night, Jake dreamed of things that had not happened yet. He saw the space station shaking apart, the planet below cracking like an egg, and thousands of beings dying in the cold vacuum of space. He saw Zara trying to warn someone about the danger, but no one would listen because she was just a servant. He woke up. Jake knew the dream was more than just a nightmare. Somehow, through their connection, he was sharing Zara's visions of possible futures. And what she was seeing was catastrophe. Jake started paying closer attention to the terraforming project's progress reports. On the surface, everything looked perfect. The alien scientists talked about how successful the operation was, how the planet would soon be ready for colonization, how this would be remembered as one of the Coalition's greatest achievements. But Jake began to notice small details that others missed. Seismic readings that were just slightly off normal. Energy fluctuations in the quantum field that the scientists dismissed as minor variations. Equipment failures that happened just a little too often to be random. When he put all these details together with what he was seeing in his shared dreams with Zara, Jake realized the horrible truth. The terraforming project was not a success. It was a disaster waiting to happen. The planet's core was becoming unstable, and when it finally collapsed, it would take the space station and everyone on it into destruction. Jake tried to bring his concerns to Captain Monroe, but she dismissed them as stress from adapting to alien environments. He attempted to discuss his findings with the Coalition scientists, but they laughed at the idea that a primitive human could understand their advanced technology better than they did. Desperate, Jake decided to risk everything by approaching Zara directly. He found her during her brief rest period, sitting alone in a maintenance corridor, eating one of the food packets he had left for her. When he sat down beside her, she did not run away. Jake spoke carefully, telling her about the dreams and visions he had been having. He described the images of planetary destruction and station collapse. As he talked, Zara's eyes grew wide with amazement and fear. She whispered that she had been seeing the same visions for weeks. She had tried to tell the scientists about the danger, but they had laughed at her or ignored her completely. Crix had beaten her for wasting his time with foolish servant fantasies. Together, Jake and Zara compared what they had seen in their visions. The details matched perfectly, down to the exact sequence of events that would lead to the catastrophe. They both knew that disaster would strike within days, but they also both knew that no one would believe warnings coming from a primitive human and a worthless servant. That was when Jake made the decision that would change everything. If the coalition would not listen to reason, then he would have to make them listen in a way they could not ignore. He would have to show them publicly that they had been treating one of the galaxy's most gifted individuals like garbage, and that their arrogance was about to kill them all. The plan Jake formed was dangerous for both of them. If it failed, he would probably be expelled from the coalition and sent back to Earth in disgrace. Zara would face punishment far worse than anything Crix had done to her before. But if they did nothing, everyone on the station would be dead within the week dot. As Jake prepared to leave, Zara caught his arm. For the first time since he had met her, she spoke more than a few whispered words. She thanked him for seeing her as more than a servant, for treating her like a person with thoughts and feelings that mattered. She said that even if his plan failed and they both died, she was grateful to have known kindness again before the end. Jake looked into her eyes and saw not just intelligence and pain, but courage and strength that had somehow survived years of cruelty and neglect. He realized that he was not just trying to save the station. He was trying to show the galaxy that they had been blind to the worth of someone extraordinary. The next day would bring the formal celebration dinner for the terraforming project's success. All the coalition leaders would be there, along with representatives from every species on the station. It would be the perfect opportunity for Jake to do something that would force them all to see Zara as she truly was. He spent the rest of the night preparing for what he knew would be the most important moment of his life, and possibly the last. The formal celebration dinner was held in the station's largest conference hall, a grand room with walls that showed images of the planet below looking green and healthy. Representatives from all 12 alien species sat around a massive circular table, their different forms creating a rainbow of scales, crystals, fur, and stranger things. The mood was happy and proud. Coalition leaders took turns making speeches about how successful the terraforming project had been. They talked about the bright future this would create, how the new planet would be home to millions of beings from across the galaxy, how this achievement showed what different species could accomplish when they worked together. Jake sat with the other humans, wearing his formal diplomatic uniform, but feeling sick to his stomach. Through the connection he now shared with Zara, he could sense her presence somewhere in the lower levels of the station. She was afraid, not just of what was coming, but of the disaster she knew would strike soon if no one listened. Captain Monroe had warned Jake 3 times during the day to behave himself at the dinner. She knew something was wrong with him, could see it in his eyes, and the way he kept staring off into space, as if he was seeing things that were not there. The last thing humanity needed was for their xenanthropologist to embarrass them in front of the entire coalition leadership. As the dinner continued, servants moved through the room, carrying trays of food and drinks. Most of these servants were from the conquered species like the Catherians, beings who were forced to work at events celebrating achievements they had helped make possible, but would receive no credit for. Jake watched the alien leaders toast their success while the servants, who had done much of the actual dangerous work, remained invisible to them. The irony made him angry in a way that surprised him with its intensity. These beings claimed to be advanced and civilized, but they were blind to the worth of those they considered beneath them. Then Jake saw her. Zara entered the hall carrying a tray of drinks, her small form nearly hidden among the taller servants. Even from across the room, Jake could see the careful way she moved, trying to avoid drawing any attention to herself. She had been cleaned up for the formal event, but Jake could still see the burn marks on her hands, and the careful way she held herself that spoke of constant pain. The moment their eyes met across the crowded room, Jake felt that familiar flood of shared sensation. But this time it was stronger, more urgent. Through their connection, Zara was showing him what she was seeing with her psychic abilities. Visions of cracks spreading through the planet's crust, of the station's hull buckling under impossible forces, of beings screaming as everything they had worked for turned to death and destruction. The visions were clearer now, more detailed. The disaster would begin in less than 2 days. There was still time to prevent it, but only if someone listened to Zara's warnings and acted on them immediately. Jake looked around the room at all the powerful aliens, celebrating their achievement. These beings had technology that could reshape worlds, weapons that could destroy star systems, knowledge that spanned millions of years of civilization. But they were about to die because they were too proud to listen to someone they considered worthless. That was when Jake made his choice. He stood up from his seat at the human table, ignoring Captain Monroe's sharp look of warning. He walked across the room toward where Zara was serving drinks to a group of Saurian military officers who did not even glance at her as she filled their glasses. The conversation in the room began to die down as beings noticed the human walking purposefully through their gathering. Jake's fellow humans watched in growing alarm as they realized he was heading toward the servant area. Captain Monroe started to rise from her seat, probably planning to intercept him before he could cause whatever scene he was planning. But Jake moved too quickly for anyone to stop him. He reached Zara just as she was turning away from the Saurian table. The tray trembled in her hands as she saw him approaching, and Jake could feel her terror through their psychic connection. She was certain that she was about to be punished for something, though she did not know what. The entire room fell silent as Jake stopped in front of Zara. Every alien in the hall was watching now, their conversations forgotten as they tried to understand what the human was doing. Some looked curious, others annoyed at the interruption of their celebration. Then Jake did something that no one in the room had expected, something that violated every rule of coalition social order and challenged everything these advanced civilizations believed about hierarchy and worth. He knelt down on one knee in front of Zara, lowering himself until he was looking up at her instead of down. In the cultures of the Galactic Coalition, kneeling was something you did only before gods or emperors, beings of such supreme importance that acknowledging their superiority was the only proper response. To kneel before a servant was not just inappropriate, it was almost unthinkable. The silence in the room became absolute. Jake could hear his own heartbeat, could sense the shock and outrage radiating from every alien present. Through his connection with Zara, he felt her amazement and terror as she realized what he had done. Captain Monroe was on her feet now, her face white with panic as she understood that Jake had just committed what the aliens would see as either an act of madness or an unforgivable insult to their entire social system. The other humans looked equally horrified, knowing that their species' membership in the coalition might not survive this moment. But Jake ignored them all. He looked up at Zara and spoke in a voice that carried clearly through the silent hall. He told the assembled coalition leadership that they had been celebrating an achievement made possible by someone they treated like garbage. He said that the being standing before them possessed knowledge that could save all their lives, but they had been too blind to see her worth. General Vax, the Saurian military leader, was the first to find his voice. He demanded to know what the human thought he was doing, kneeling before a waste handler as if she were royalty. Other voices joined in, calling Jake's behavior evidence that humans were too primitive and emotional to deserve membership in civilized galactic society. The Helix Collective spoke in their eerie chorus of crystal voices, declaring that Jake's actions showed a fundamental misunderstanding of proper social order. They said that servants existed to serve, and treating them as equals would only lead to chaos and the breakdown of civilization. Captain Monroe tried to apologize for her crew members' behavior, promising that Jake would be disciplined for his inappropriate actions. She begged the alien leaders to remember that humans were still learning proper coalition etiquette and should not be judged too harshly for their mistakes. But Jake remained kneeling, his hand extended toward Zara in a gesture of respect and invitation. He spoke again, his voice calm, despite the chaos around him. He told Zara to share with the assembled leaders what she had seen in her visions, to warn them of the disaster that was approaching whether they wanted to hear it or not. For a long moment, Zara could not speak. She had lived her entire adult life being told that her thoughts and feelings did not matter, that her only value lay in her ability to handle dangerous materials that others could not touch. Now a human was asking her to address the most powerful beings in the galaxy, as if her words had weight and importance. Then, drawing strength from Jake's faith in her, Zara began to speak. Her voice was quiet at first, barely audible above the angry muttering of the alien leaders. But as she described her visions of planetary collapse and station destruction, her voice grew stronger and more confident. She told them about the seismic instabilities she had sensed while working with the quantum-sensitive materials. She described the pattern of system failures that would cascade into total disaster. She gave them exact time frames, specific technical details, and precise sequences of events that would lead to everyone's death if they did not act immediately. The alien scientists began to scoff and laugh, dismissing her warnings as the fantasies of an uneducated servant. But Jake produced data he had been secretly collecting, seismic readings and energy measurements that supported every detail of Zara's predictions. The evidence was undeniable, but the coalition leadership's pride prevented them from accepting that their greatest achievement was actually their greatest failure. As Zara finished speaking, still standing above the kneeling human who had given her the courage to find her voice, the room erupted into arguments. Some aliens demanded that both Jake and Zara be arrested for disturbing the peace. Others insisted that the predictions be investigated, just to be safe. But before anyone could act on either suggestion, the station's emergency alarms began to sound, their urgent wailing cutting through all the angry voices like a knife through silk. The emergency alarms cut through the dinner hall like screams of metal and light. Every being in the room froze as the automated station voice began announcing critical system failures from the terraforming facility on the planet below. Massive seismic activity was detected, exactly matching the pattern Zara had described just moments before. Jake remained kneeling as chaos erupted around them. Through his connection with Zara, he could feel her terror not at being proven right, but at what her visions told her was coming next. The disaster was unfolding exactly as she had foreseen, and they had perhaps hours before the cascade failures reached a point where nothing could stop them. The alien leaders abandoned their dinner tables and rushed to communication stations around the hall, demanding reports from their scientists and engineers. The news that came back was uniformly bad. Quantum field destabilization was spreading through the planet's core. The terraforming equipment was overloading and shutting down. Energy readings were spiking beyond anything the monitoring systems had been designed to handle. General Vax barked orders at his military staff while the crystalline Helix beings formed a cluster and began their collective decision-making process. The other species representatives shouted over each other in a dozen different languages as they tried to coordinate emergency responses that none of them really understood. Captain Monroe approached Jake, her face a mixture of anger and desperate worry. She hissed at him to get up and stop making their situation worse, but Jake refused to move. He told her that Zara had not just predicted the disaster, she had seen the solution. But she would only share it with people who treated her with the respect she deserved. The captain stared down at her kneeling crew member and the small alien females standing beside him. Around them, the most powerful beings in the galaxy were panic-stricken and helpless, their advanced technology useless against a problem they had never imagined could exist. Monroe was a practical woman who had fought her way up through military ranks by making hard choices, and she could see that this might be one of the hardest. More reports came in from the planet's surface. The seismic activity was getting worse. By the minute, several terraforming stations had already been destroyed, and the quantum instability was spreading like a cancer through the planet's geological structure. Evacuation became impossible as the growing energy distortions prevented ships from safely engaging their faster-than-light drives. The coalition scientists huddled together, their instruments and calculations telling them that they were facing something beyond their understanding. Dr. Kempf, the lead Saurian researcher, admitted that their models had never predicted this kind of core instability. They had no idea what was causing it or how to stop it. That was when Jake spoke again, his voice carrying across the panicked hall. He told the assembled leaders that they were asking the wrong questions. Instead of trying to understand what was happening, they should be asking the one being who had already seen how it would end and what needed to be done to prevent it. Several alien voices shouted that they would never take orders from a servant. The Helix Collective declared that consulting with lower caste beings would violate the fundamental principles of their civilization. Even as their world crumbled around them, their pride was more important than their survival. But not all of them felt the same way. Dr. Yenna, a female researcher from the peaceful Altarian species, approached the area where Jake knelt beside Zara. Her people were known for their wisdom and their willingness to consider new ideas, even uncomfortable ones. Dr. Yenna looked down at Zara with something that might have been respect in her large, gentle eyes. She asked if the Catherian truly knew how to prevent the disaster that was destroying their great achievement. When Zara nodded, still amazed that anyone was listening to her, the Altarian scientist did something that shocked everyone present. She knelt down beside Jake, her graceful form folding until she too was looking up at Zara instead of down. Her voice was soft but clear as she asked for help, not demanding it as a superior to an inferior, but requesting it as one intelligent being to another. The sight of a respected coalition scientist kneeling beside the human created another wave of shocked silence. But this time, the silence was broken by Captain Monroe, who had been watching the growing disaster reports and thinking about what Jake had told her. Monroe was responsible for the lives of her human crew members, and she could see that conventional solutions were failing. The alien technology that had seemed so advanced was proving useless against this crisis. If there was even a chance that this servant girl knew something that could save them all, then Monroe was willing to swallow her pride to find out. The human captain walked over to where Jake and Dr. Yenna knelt before Zara. She looked the young Catherian in the eyes, seeing for the first time the intelligence and strength that Jake had recognized from the beginning. Then she too lowered herself to one knee, her military uniform a stark contrast to her humble position. Captain Monroe spoke simply and directly. She said that human lives were at stake, along with thousands of others, and she would do whatever was necessary to save them. She asked Zara to help them, not as a superior giving orders to a servant, but as one person asking another for aid in a desperate situation. One by one, other humans in the hall followed their captain's example. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Park knelt beside her captain. Engineer Marcus Liu left his station and joined them on the floor. Communications Officer Sandra Wells abandoned her post to add her voice to the growing chorus of humans asking for Zara's help. The sight of an entire species, representatives kneeling before someone the coalition considered expendable, created a moment of cognitive shock for the alien observers. Their understanding of proper social order was being challenged in ways that their minds struggled to process. But the gesture was having its intended effect on Zara herself. For the first time in her adult life, she was being treated not just with basic dignity, but with genuine respect. These beings were acknowledging that she possessed knowledge they needed, that her thoughts and insights had value beyond her ability to handle dangerous materials. Drawing strength from their faith in her, Zara began to explain what she had seen in her visions and what she understood about the disaster unfolding around them. She told them that the terraforming process had created an unexpected resonance in the planet's quantum field, a feedback loop that was tearing the world apart from the inside out. But more importantly, she revealed something that stunned even Jake. The Catherians were not just psychic, they were quantum engineers. Their consciousness could actually interact with and manipulate the fundamental forces that held matter and energy together. Their enslavement had not just been morally wrong, it had been strategically catastrophic, depriving the coalition of their greatest potential allies in understanding and controlling these cosmic forces. Zara explained that she could potentially stabilize the planet's quantum field, but she would need help. The process would require her to extend her consciousness across vast distances, linking her mind with the planet's core, while someone else served as her anchor to prevent her from being lost in the cosmic stream of possibilities. As she spoke, more emergency reports flooded in. The quantum instability was accelerating, and they now had less than 6 hours before the cascade failure became irreversible. Traditional evacuation was impossible, and their advanced technology was completely useless against forces that operated on levels their science barely understood. Jake looked up at Zara from his kneeling position and told her that he would be her anchor. Through their psychic connection, he could guide her consciousness back to her body when the work was done. It was dangerous for both of them, possibly fatal, but it was their only chance to save the thousands of lives hanging in the balance. Alien leaders who had been so certain of their superiority just hours before now faced a choice that challenged everything they believed about hierarchy, worth, and the nature of civilization itself. They could maintain their pride and die with it, or they could acknowledge that they had been catastrophically wrong about the value of those they had dismissed as inferior. Time was running out, and the fate of everyone on the station now rested in the hands of a human who saw worth where others saw garbage, and a Catherian whose true nature had been hidden beneath years of enforced servitude. The next few hours passed like a nightmare made of light and sound and impossible mathematics. Jake and Zara worked together in the station's quantum laboratory, surrounded by equipment that most beings were forbidden even to see. The alien scientists watched in amazement as the human and the former servant transformed their most advanced instruments into something entirely new. Zara's consciousness expanded beyond her physical form, reaching across space to touch the wounded quantum field that surrounded the dying planet below. Jake served as her anchor, his own awakening psychic abilities allowing him to maintain a connection with her mind, even as it stretched across impossible distances. Through their link, Jake experienced what it meant to see the universe as Zara did. Reality was not solid and fixed, but a flowing river of possibilities that could be shaped by will and understanding. The planet's core was not just rock and metal, but a complex pattern of energy and matter that had been thrown into chaos by forces the terraforming scientists had never imagined. But Zara could see the pattern that lay beneath the chaos, the natural harmony that could be restored if someone knew how to reach it. Her mind touched the quantum field and began to sing to it, not with sound but with pure intention, gradually coaxing the wild energies back into stable configurations. The work was incredibly dangerous. Several times, Jake felt Zara's consciousness begin to drift away, pulled by the cosmic forces she was manipulating. Each time, he called her back, using their psychic bond to remind her of her physical form and the world that needed her to return to it. Around them, the coalition leaders watched in stunned silence as their instruments showed the impossible happening. The seismic activity on the planet below was slowing down. The quantum field instabilities were gradually stabilizing. The cascade failure that should have destroyed everything was being reversed by forces their science said could not exist. Captain Monroe coordinated with the alien engineers, helping them understand what Jake and Z